Jessica, you're marrying a liar. Get out while you can. I flinched, almost dropping the engagement ring I'd been admiring. I turned to see Laura leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, and an infuriating smirk on her face. Don't make a scene, Laura. What are you talking about? I tried to keep my voice calm, but it quivered slightly. She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on mine. You think you know Mark? He's been playing you. He's not who you think he is. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. It was Mark, texting me he'd be late again. It was the third time this week. I sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. See? Always an excuse, Laura said, her tone mocking. My gaze hardened. Whatever issues you have with Mark, leave me out of it. We're happy, and nothing you say will change that. Laura shrugged nonchalantly. Suit yourself, just don't say I didn't warn you. She walked out, leaving a storm of doubts in her wake. Later that evening, Mark finally came home. His tie was loosened, and he looked tired. I met him at the door. Rough day? I asked, placing a hand on his chest. Yeah, the usual, he replied, kissing my forehead distractedly before heading to the kitchen. I followed him, watching as he poured himself a glass of water. Laura said something weird today. He arched an eyebrow, sipping his drink. What about? She said you're lying to me, that I should get out while I can. Mark's expression darkened before he laughed it off. Laura loves drama. You know that. She's probably just bored. Bored enough to make serious accusations about us? He put down his glass, stepping closer. Jess, you know how she is. Don't let her get into your head. You and me were solid, right? I wanted to believe him. I really did. So I nodded, trying to push Laura's words from my mind. Yeah, we're solid. The next day, I was at the cafe planning the wedding details, going over florists and caterers, when Laura showed up again. This time, she was with Mark. They were laughing about something, standing too close for comfort. Hey, I called out, trying to hide my irritation. Mark and Laura turned to me, Mark grinning and Laura with that same smirk as yesterday. Jess, there you are, Mark said, walking over to give me a quick kiss. Laura and I just ran into each other. Thought I'd say hi. Right? I said, forcing a smile. Well, I need to talk to Mark about some wedding stuff. Laura sat across from me, clearly not leaving. I'm sure Mark has a moment. Let's hear it. It was hard to focus with her there, her eyes watching every move I made. Every time I glanced up, she was smirking or whispering something to Mark. Later, back at home, I felt the tension building inside me. Mark, can we talk? Sure, what's up? He replied, sitting on the couch. Can you tell Laura to back off a bit? She's becoming a bit intrusive, he sighed, rubbing his face. Jessica, she's my friend. You know that. She's excited about the wedding, too. Still, there's a limit. She doesn't need to be there every time we're together. Mark looked at me, exasperated. I'll talk to her, okay? But don't blow this out of proportion. I bit my lip, feeling dismissed. Fine, I muttered, heading to bed. As I lay there, doubts crept back in. Laura's words, her presence, and Mark's dismissive attitude weighed heavily on me. I wanted to trust him. I needed to trust him. But something felt off. Am I just imagining things? I whispered into the darkness, the silence offering no answers. I woke up the next morning to find Mark already gone, leaving just a note. Big meeting today. See you tonight. Love, Mark. I frowned, feeling the distance growing between us. I needed answers, but instead of confronting, I decided to observe. I was knee-deep in wedding preparations. The florist was showing me arrangements when Laura swanned into the shop like she owned the place. Jessica, you look busy, she said with a fake smile. Just a bit, I replied curtly, not in the mood for her antics. That's why I'm here. Thought you could use some help. She drifted toward the flowers, picking one up and twirling it. This is fun, isn't it? Sure, Laura, I said, trying to focus on the florist. Oh, come on, she interrupted. Planning a wedding must be stressful. Tell me, what's next? Cakes? Dresses? I shot her a stern look. We're managing fine, Laura. But she wasn't backing down. Every decision was questioned, every choice criticized. By the end of the appointment, I was exhausted. I'm just saying, maybe you should let Mark decide a few things. He's good at this, Laura said, winking. Thanks for the help, but I think we've got it under control, I answered, keeping my frustration in check. Later that evening, Mark came home late again. I was waiting in the kitchen, tapping my fingers on the table. You're late again, I said as he walked in. Work's been crazy, he replied, loosening his tie. Yeah, I can tell. Laura's been a great help, I said sarcastically. Mark sighed, clearly tired. I know she can be a bit much, but she means well. I stared at him, trying to read his expression. She's more involved than I am at this point. We're just friends, Jessica, he said, sounding annoyed. Friends don't act like that, Mark. This is our wedding, not hers. My voice was rising now, the doubts and frustrations bubbling over. Calm down, Jessica. You're overreacting. I have every right to react, Mark. She's everywhere we go, making decisions and undermining me. I could feel the tears of anger welling up. He ran a hand through his hair. I'll talk to her, okay? Just let it go for now. I wanted to scream, to make him see what was happening, but instead, I nodded, too drained to continue arguing. The next day, I met my mom for lunch. She could always tell when something was wrong. What's going on, sweetie? She asked, her eyes full of concern. It's Mark and Laura. She's always around, and I feel like there's something off, I admitted, my voice cracking. Honey, sometimes you have to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. She squeezed my hand. Have you confronted him? I've tried, but he brushes it off. I don't know what to do. Stay strong, Jessica. You deserve honesty. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself. My mom's words were firm, giving me a bit of the strength I needed. That night, I decided to stay up and see where Mark was going. He'd been vague about his whereabouts, and I needed to know. Around midnight, my patience paid off. Mark's phone buzzed. It was a message from Laura. Be there in 10. My heart pounded as I watched him leave. I followed at a safe distance, trying to keep calm. He stopped at a quiet street, and there she was, waiting by her car. They hugged, too warmly for just friends. I quietly snapped photos, my hands shaking. As I returned home, fury and hurt swirled within me. This wasn't over. Laura's manipulation had gone too far, and Mark's betrayal was clear. I wasn't backing down. It was time to get what was rightfully mine. Morning sun streamed through the curtains, but its warmth did little to soothe the cold knot of anxiety in my stomach. I met my mom for breakfast, still reeling from the previous night's discovery. Honey, you look like you've seen a ghost, she said, her voice edging with worry. I found them, Mom. Mark and Laura. Together, I said, showing her the photos I had taken. Her face darkened. Jessica, this is serious. You need to confront him. I will, but now's not the right time, I responded, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I need a plan. She nodded, understanding. Whatever you need, I'm here. Back home, I was setting the table when the doorbell rang. It was Mark, his usual charm dialed up. Hey, beautiful. He tried to kiss me, but I turned away. We need to talk, Mark. I put the photos on the table, his eyes widened in surprise. What are these? He demanded, but his voice lacked the usual confidence. You tell me, I challenged, folding my arms. It's not what it looks like, he started, but I cut him off. Save it. I just want the truth. My voice was steady, a contrast to the storm raging inside me. He sighed, shoulders sagging. Laura's been having problems. I've been trying to help her, that's all. There's nothing going on. If that's all, why didn't you tell me? I countered, my anger flaring. I didn't want you to worry, he said, trying to reach for my hand. I pulled away, staring at the man I thought I knew. Mark, you promised me honesty. This isn't it. Before he could respond, his phone rang, Laura's name flashing on the screen. He silenced it, but it was too late. My suspicions were confirmed. Answer her, I said coldly. Tell her she's not welcome here anymore. He looked panicked, but nodded, dialing her back and putting the call on speaker. Hey, Laura, he said, voice strained. Mark, what's happening? She whined. Did she see the pictures? Yes, Laura, I did, I said sharply, stepping closer. This charade ends now. The line went silent for a moment before she hung up. I turned to Mark, feeling a strange mix of relief and despair. We need boundaries. No more, Laura. You need to choose, Mark. Me or her. I choose you, Jessica. Always, he said, desperation in his eyes. I'll handle it. He left to meet Laura, and I finally exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. An hour later, he returned. She's out of our lives, he said, but I wasn't convinced. Later that night, as I sat in the living room, Mark's phone buzzed again. Another message from Laura. This isn't over. I knew then that I couldn't just rely on Mark's words. This was my fight, too. That night I called Megan, my best friend. Megan, I need your help. Anything, Jess. What's going on? It's Mark and Laura, I explained the situation. Damn, Jess, we need a plan, she replied, always ready for action. Yes, I said, feeling a spark of determination. We're going to expose them, both of them. And so with Megan and my mother by my side, I began planning the ultimate revelation. This wedding would not go as planned. It would be a day of truth, justice, and most of all, karma. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension was almost unbearable. But I tried to keep my composure. Mark seemed oblivious, acting like everything was fine between us. Laura was noticeably absent, but I knew better than to lower my guard. One evening, just before dinner, my mom pulled me aside. "Jessica, have you made any more progress?" I nodded, showing her the folder I had put together. The evidence was all there. "We'll expose them at the wedding. Megan's agreed to help." Mom looked relieved. "Good. They need to face the consequences." That night, Mark called me into the living room. He was holding his phone, looking troubled. "Jessica, I got a strange message from Laura. She wants to meet." "Don't go, Mark. She's trying to manipulate you again," I said firmly. He nodded, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. "You're right. I won't." It was the reassurance I needed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things had to come to a head soon. 2 days before the wedding, Megan came over with a projector, a laptop, and a determined look on her face. "We're set. Everything's ready to go." "Thank you, Megan," I said, hugging her. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "We've got your back, Jess. Mark and Laura won't see this coming," Megan assured me. The night before the wedding, I paced in my room, phone in hand. It buzzed with a new message. From Laura. "Meet me at the park now." Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and headed out. I needed to hear whatever she had to say for herself. At the park, Laura was waiting by the fountain, her face half hidden by the shadows. "You came," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Say what you need to say, Laura," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You and Mark playing house while I'm left in the cold," she spat. "This is your fault, Laura. You brought this on yourself," I shot back. "Maybe so, but I'm not going down alone," she said, a sinister smile creeping across her face. "I've got my own plans for the wedding." My heart raced. "What are you talking about?" "Just wait and see," she purred, turning on her heel and walking away, leaving me in a whirl of anger and fear. The next day, I shared Laura's threat with Megan and my mom. "We need to be prepared for anything," I said. "We will be," Megan reassured me. "Let's stick to our plan." Finally, it was the day of the wedding. Guests filled the venue, chatting and laughing, oblivious to the storm brewing. I stood in my dress, feeling like a warrior preparing for battle. The ceremony began, and as Mark and I stood at the altar, I felt Megan's reassuring presence behind me. Just as the officiant began his speech, I nodded to Megan. She hit play. The projector lit up, displaying the incriminating photos and texts between Mark and Laura. Gasps filled the room as the truth spilled onto the screen. "This is what you've really been up to, Mark," I said, voice trembling with emotion. Mark turned pale. "Jessica, I can explain." "There's no need, Mark. It's all right here for everyone to see," I said, my anger giving way to a heavy sense of relief. Laura, who had been hiding at the back, tried to slip out unnoticed, but Megan blocked her path. "Not so fast, Laura. Time to face the music." The room erupted in murmurs and outrage. Family and friends turned their backs on Mark and Laura, their support for me clear. Mark looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Jessica, I'm sorry. Please, just give me a chance to explain." "It's over, Mark. I deserve better than this," I said, walking away, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. As I left the venue, my mom and Megan flanking me, I knew this was just the beginning of my journey to healing. The truth was out, and justice had been served. Now it was time to move on. After the explosive revelation at the wedding, I felt a mixture of fury and vindication. As my mother and Megan guided me out of the venue, I knew this was far from over. Mark and Laura had to face the consequences. The following day, I sat in my living room with Megan, going over the next steps. "Jessica, are you sure about this? This plan can backfire," Megan said, looking worried. "We have to be thorough, Megan. They need to feel the consequences of their actions," I replied, steady and determined. My mom joined us with coffee. "What's the plan?" "We've gathered all the evidence. Now we need to put everything together and present it to Mark and Laura's circles," I explained. Megan nodded in agreement. "We'll make sure they won't escape this, professionally and socially." We divided tasks. Megan would handle Laura's workplace and social circles. My mom and I would focus on Mark's colleagues and friends. The next morning, I sent an email to Mark's associates with attached evidence of his betrayal. I knew it could jeopardize his career, but he deserved it. Megan was equally ruthless, sending a detailed dossier to Laura's boss. We waited for the fallout. Just before noon, my phone rang. It was Megan, breathless with excitement. "Jessica, you won't believe this. Laura's been called into a meeting with her boss. She's toast." Relief washed over me. "We did it, Megan. This is only the beginning." Hours later, Mark stormed into my house, anger radiating off him. "What did you do, Jess?" "Exposed you for what you are," I said coldly, standing my ground. "You've destroyed my career. How could you?" he yelled, pacing the room. "You destroyed our relationship, Mark. Actions have consequences," I retorted. While we argued, Megan texted me updates. Laura had been suspended, pending further investigation. "What do you expect to gain from this?" "Revenge won't fix anything," Mark said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I expect you to face the same humiliation you inflicted on me," I replied. With a final glare, Mark stormed out. I slumped onto the couch, exhausted but feeling some sense of justice. Days turned into weeks. News of Mark's unethical behavior spread, causing him to spiral further. His colleagues distanced themselves, and his professional reputation took a nosedive. For Laura, things weren't any better. She was ultimately fired, her manipulative nature revealed to all. She became socially isolated as her friends and acquaintances shunned her. During this period, I focused on healing. My mom and Megan were my pillars of support. One evening, while having dinner with them, I reflected on everything that had happened. "I never imagined things would go this way," I admitted. "Sometimes karma has a way of working itself out," my mom said wisely. Megan raised her glass. "To new beginnings and justice served." "To new beginnings," I echoed, feeling a sense of release. Months later, I was in a much better place. I had started a new job, found peace in small routines, and surrounded myself with genuine people. The scars were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. As I sat in my garden, sipping tea and looking at the sunset, I realized that revenge wasn't the most satisfying part. It was reclaiming my life and finding strength I didn't know I had. The betrayal of Mark and the manipulation of Laura had shaken me to my core, but I emerged stronger, resilient, and ready to start anew. The wedding day was meant to be perfect. Instead, it became unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. As Megan hit play, and the truth spilled out for everyone to see, the reaction was instantaneous. People gasped, and whispers filled the room. Mark's face turned white, then red with fury. Laura tried to disappear into the crowd, but Megan's glare kept her rooted in place. "Jess, this is out of control," Mark said, trying to reach for my hand. I pulled away, staring at him. "No, Mark, what was out of control was your betrayal." "This is justice," I responded, my voice firm. Laura stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You think this makes you better, Jessica?" "You're pathetic." I turned to face her, feeling the sting of her words but standing tall. "You are the one who's pathetic, Laura. You and Mark deserve each other." Friends and family began to rally around me. My mother stood at my side, her face calm but resolute. "Get out," she said to Mark and Laura. "Neither of you are welcome here anymore." Mark looked to the crowd for support but found only cold eyes. Laura sneered, trying to salvage her pride. "I always knew you were a vindictive witch, Jessica," she spat. "Enjoy your victory." "Oh, I will," I shot back. As they walked out, the room fell into a stunned silence. Megan took the mic, thus clearing her throat. "Thank you all for coming. This event is now over." One by one, guests came up to me, offering words of support and apology for not seeing the signs earlier. As the last drunk uncle staggered out, Megan whispered to me, "You did it, Jess. It's over." "Not quite, but it's a start," I replied, feeling a small sense of relief. Back at my mom's house, she poured me a glass of wine. "I'm proud of you, Jessica. You stood up for yourself." "Thanks, Mom, but it still hurts," I admitted. "Healing takes time, but you're on the right path," she reassured me, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. That night, I lay in bed, letting the events of the day wash over me. Mark and Laura were out of my life, but the scars remained. I knew the road to recovery would be long. The next morning, Megan called. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better, but we did the right thing. By the way, any news on them?" "Oh, Laura's in shambles. Lost her job and her so-called friends. As for Mark, he's facing professional exile. No one wants to be associated with a liar," she said, satisfaction dripping from her words. Well, karma's working faster than I thought, I replied, unable to hide my relief. Over the next few weeks, Mark tried to contact me multiple times, but I blocked every attempt. I was done with him. Laura didn't dare to reach out, knowing any interaction would only make things worse for her. One afternoon, while I was having lunch with Megan, she leaned in. "You've started dating again?" I blushed. "A little. Met someone online. Nothing serious, but he's nice." "Good for you, Jess. You deserve all the happiness." "I'm taking it slow. Still healing," I said, smiling softly. Fast forward to a month later and I was at a cafe, meeting my gentleman friend Ethan for a casual lunch. He knew bits of my past, but I kept it light. "So how was your week?" he asked, genuinely interested. "It was good. Busy, but good," I replied, feeling the warmth of his gaze. Ethan grinned. "Well, here's to great beginnings and better days ahead." As we clinked glasses, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. My journey was far from over, but I was moving forward, one step at a time. Revenge had its place, but now it was time for renewal and growth. My shattered vows had led me to newfound strength, ready for whatever life had in store next. The fallout from the wedding debacle continued to ripple through our lives. Mark and Laura were now pariahs in our social circles. The sense of vindication was satisfying, but it didn't completely erase the pain. One evening, as I was unpacking some boxes in my new apartment, a fresh start I desperately needed, my phone buzzed. Megan's name flashed on the screen. "Jess, have you heard? Mark and Laura are apparently trying to set the record straight," she said, a mix of shock and amusement in her voice. "What now?" I asked, exasperated but intrigued. "They've scheduled a press conference to clear the air, or so they claim." I sighed. Desperate times, I guess. What are they planning to say? "Who knows, but whatever it is, it's not going to change what they did," Megan replied. "True," I said, shaking my head. "Well, let's see how this goes." The next day, the press conference was all over social media. I watched a live stream from the comfort of my home. Mark and Laura stood at the podium, looking disheveled and cornered. Mark cleared his throat, glancing nervously at Laura. "We are here to apologize and explain our actions. What we did was wrong, and we are deeply sorry for the hurt we caused." Laura stepped forward, her eyes cold. "Yes, we made mistakes, but the way Jessica handled things was extreme." I could almost hear Megan scoffing from across town. "What a joke," I muttered to myself. Mark tried to regain control. "We've learned from this experience, and we hope to move forward, asking for forgiveness from those we've wronged." I turned off the stream, feeling a mix of disgust and relief. If they thought a public apology would fix everything, they were sorely mistaken. 2 days later, I was at a local cafe with Megan when someone approached our table. It was Laura. I stiffened, ready for another confrontation, but she looked different, defeated almost. "Jessica, can we talk?" she asked meekly. Megan bristled. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Laura." "It's okay, Megan," I said, taking a deep breath. Turning to Laura, I asked, "What do you want?" I wanted to say, "I'm sorry, genuinely sorry for everything." Her voice was shaky, and for the first time I saw a crack in her armor. "I lost my job, my friends. It's been hell." "Well, actions have consequences," I replied coolly. "I know, and I deserve it, but you should know Mark's been struggling too. He can't find work, and his family's cut him off. This has hurt everyone," she said, a tear sliding down her cheek. "This is not my problem, Laura," I responded, feeling no pity. "You're right. I just needed to face you. To admit what I did," she said, turning to leave. "Goodbye, Jessica." Megan watched her go. "Do you believe her? Does it matter?" I asked. Their apology doesn't change what they did. As days turned into weeks, I received updates from mutual friends. Mark had been shunned in his professional world, and Laura was struggling to rebuild her life. Their attempts to mitigate damage had failed. Public sympathy was scarce. One afternoon, my mom surprised me with a visit. "I brought cake. Let's celebrate your fresh start," she said, beaming. "Suits me," I said, setting the table. Over dessert, my mom asked, "Have you heard from Mark?" "A couple of emails, all ignored," I replied. "Good. Moving on is the best revenge," she said wisely. The final piece of closure came when I received a letter from Mark. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won. "Jessica, I'm deeply sorry. I've lost nearly everything, but writing this gives me some peace. I hope you find happiness. You deserve it. Mark." I folded the letter, setting it aside. It was too late for apologies, but knowing he recognized his faults brought some closure. As I stood on my balcony that evening, watching the city lights twinkle, I felt a sense of calm. The storm had passed, and it was time to embrace the future, free from lies and betrayal. I was ready to step into the unknown, stronger and more resilient than ever. Months had passed since the chaos of the wedding. Life had started to settle into a new normal. I focused on my work, my friends, and rebuilding myself from the ground up. The process was long and painful, but I emerged stronger. One Saturday morning, Megan and I were at our favorite coffee shop, sipping lattes and chatting about our week when my phone buzzed with a news alert. I glanced at it and felt my stomach drop. Mark Davis, former executive, files for bankruptcy amid professional isolation, read the headline. Megan noticed my reaction. "What's up?" "Mark is filing for bankruptcy," I said, showing her the news. "Good," she commented. "He deserves every bit of it." I nodded but didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Instead, I felt a strange sense of finality washing over me. As we walked out, Megan turned to me. "So what's next for you, Jess? New job prospects?" "Actually, yes, I've had a few interviews. Hoping something comes through soon," I replied. "You'll crush it. You always do," she said, giving me a side hug. That afternoon, I decided to take a stroll through the park where everything with Laura had come to a head. It felt therapeutic to walk through the place that once held so much tension and now meant nothing more than a patch of green and blue sky. While sitting on a bench contemplating my journey, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Ethan. "Dinner tonight? My treat," it read. I smiled to myself. "Sure, 7 p.m. at the usual spot?" I replied. As I got ready that evening, my mom called. "Jessica, I saw the news about Mark. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. It feels like I can finally move on," I reassured her. "I'm proud of you. Just remember, you've come a long way, and I'm always here for you," she said. "Thanks, Mom. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. Have fun tonight." At dinner, Ethan was his usual charming self, asking about my day and genuinely interested in my answers. It felt refreshing to talk to someone who had no connection to my past turmoil. "Have you thought about taking a vacation?" Ethan asked halfway through the meal. "You know, that sounds like a great idea. A bit of a break from everything," I admitted. "We could plan a trip together," he suggested, making my heart flutter. "Maybe we could," I said, smiling. At the end of the night, as Ethan walked me to my door, he paused. "Jessica, I really enjoy spending time with you." "I feel the same," I replied, a warmth spreading through me. "Good night, then," he said, leaning in for a gentle kiss. "Good night," I echoed, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. As I closed the door, I realized how far I had come. The pain and betrayal that once defined my life were starting to fade into the background, replaced by new experiences and genuine connections. The next morning, I sat in my living room, looking out at the city. My phone buzzed with another notification, but this time it was an email about a job offer I had been hoping for. "You've got this," I said to myself, taking a deep breath. With that, I accepted the offer, feeling ready to embrace this new chapter. My journey was far from over, but each step was a testament to my resilience and strength. The road ahead was unknown, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced betrayal, fought for justice, and emerged victorious. Now, it was time to build a future on my terms. With my mom, Megan, and Ethan by my side, I was ready for whatever life had in store next. As I stepped out onto my balcony, the morning sun bathing me in its warmth, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past was behind me, and the future was bright, and I was ready.